The glare of the stage lights was merciless, catching the beads of sweat on my cousin Amelia's brow as she clutched the crystalline trophy to her chest. From my seat in the back of the auditorium, I could see the slight tremor in her hands. To the adoring crowd, it looked like humility, the nervous energy of a young prodigy overwhelmed by her own brilliance. They saw the future of theoretical physics. I saw a thief buckling under the weight of a stolen crown. This award, for my work on quantum entanglement and temporal paradoxes, it's an honor I never dreamed possible, she stammered into the microphone. Her voice, usually so confident and cutting, was thin and reedy. Your work? I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. The lie was so audacious, so complete, that it was almost beautiful in its destructive potential. This was the moment. In my last life, this exact award ceremony had been the pinnacle of my career, the validation of a lifetime of work stolen by a family who couldn't stand to see me shine. The shock of their ultimate betrayal, orchestrated by the very same cousin on that stage, had sent a surge of pressure to my brain, and my world had ended in a flash of white-hot pain and darkness. This time, the ceremony wasn't my ending. It was hers. I had built this stage, written her speech, and designed the pedestal she stood upon. I had also, very carefully, designed the trapdoor beneath her feet, and I was about to pull the lever. My life before this one, the first draft, was a masterclass in quiet suffering. I was born into a family that treated me like a supporting character in my own story. The lead role was always reserved for my cousin Amelia. We were born 3 months apart, a detail our parents, who were sisters, found endlessly charming. It was their excuse to raise us as a matched set, a project in comparison where I was consistently found wanting. Amelia was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could cry on cue to get the last piece of cake or the more expensive Christmas present. I was the quiet one, the bookish one, a term my mother used with a faint curl of her lip, as if it were a mild but unfortunate deformity. Our family gatherings were a recurring tribunal where Amelia's latest minor accomplishment, a passable book report, a second-place ribbon in a school sports day, was celebrated with the fervor of a national holiday. My achievements were met with polite silence, or worse, a dismissive, "That's nice, dear, but did you hear Amelia was voted most popular in her class?" The financial and emotional neglect was a slow, creeping poison. When I won a citywide scholarship for a prestigious science summer camp, my parents claimed they couldn't afford the travel expenses. 2 weeks later, they paid for Amelia to go on a lavish trip to Paris with my aunt and uncle because she'd had a stressful semester. My college fund, meticulously saved by a grandmother who had seen a spark in me, was drained to pay for Amelia's private tutoring, her designer wardrobe for her debutante ball, and a brand new car for her 16th birthday because mine, a 10-year-old sedan, embarrassed her in front of her friends. When I protested, my father would give me a weary look. "Don't be selfish, Clara. Amelia needs these things. It's important for her development. You're smart. You'll figure things out on your own." My mother was worse. She actively sabotaged me, all while maintaining a veneer of maternal concern. She would accidentally spill coffee on my term papers, forget to wake me up for important exams, and constantly tell me I was too sensitive, too ambitious, too much. "Why can't you just be happy for your cousin?" She'd sigh, as if my desire for basic recognition was a personal affront to her. Despite it all, I had something they couldn't take: my mind. In the solitude of my room, surrounded by secondhand textbooks, I dove into the world of theoretical physics. It was a place of order and elegance where the universe's grandest secrets could be unlocked with logic and imagination. It was my sanctuary. I worked 3 part-time jobs to put myself through state university, living on instant noodles and library coffee. While Amelia was being celebrated for joining the right sorority, I was publishing my first paper in a peer-reviewed journal under a professor who saw the raw, untamed genius my family refused to acknowledge. That was the beginning of my rise and the beginning of their panic. My success was an inconvenient truth that disrupted their carefully constructed family narrative. They couldn't ignore it, so they tried to co-opt it. Suddenly, they were the masterminds behind my genius. "We always knew she had it in her," my aunt would gush at family dinners. "We pushed her, you know. It took our whole family's effort to get her where she is. Amelia's jealousy, however, was a far more venomous creature. She had coasted through life on charm and her parents' money, getting a business degree with mediocre grades. My growing acclaim in a field she couldn't even begin to comprehend was like an acid eating away at her. She saw my light not as something to celebrate, but as a shadow that was cast upon her. The final act of my first life was my magnum opus, a unified theory that elegantly reconciled quantum mechanics with general relativity, a paper I called the Thorne-Feynman Bridge, a nod to the great minds who inspired me. It was revolutionary, the kind of work that wins Nobel Prizes. I was meticulous, working for 2 years in near total isolation, pouring every ounce of my soul onto the page. I made one fatal mistake. On the night before I was set to submit it, my family threw a surprise party to celebrate my upcoming success. It was a farce. Their smiles were brittle, their congratulations laced with an undercurrent of resentment. Amelia was particularly effusive, hugging me tightly, telling me how proud she was. Flustered and exhausted for one foolish moment, I let my guard down. I believed them. The next morning, my paper was gone from my hard drive. A week later, it was published online under a new name, Amelia Thorne. She hadn't just stolen it, she had claimed my entire academic identity. She went on the news, her face a mask of counterfeit brilliance, explaining my life's work using talking points she'd clearly memorized from my notes. My family closed ranks around her. When I screamed, cried, and showed them my original drafts, my father told me I was having a nervous breakdown from the pressure. My mother suggested I check into a hospital. "You're delusional, Clara," she said, her eyes cold. "Amelia has been working on this for years. You must have seen her notes and gotten confused." The academic community, seeing a unified family front and a history of what my parents now painted as my instability, sided with the charming, well-presented Amelia over the frantic, disheveled girl who looked like she'd lost her mind. I was branded a fraud, a plagiarist, a jealous nobody trying to steal her brilliant cousin's thunder. The stress was unbearable. The world I had built with my mind, the only thing that had ever been truly mine, had been stolen and used as a weapon against me. The day the Nobel Committee announced they were considering Amelia for their shortlist, I was in my small apartment watching her on television. She was wearing my favorite color. She smiled, a triumphant, cutting smile, and as the camera zoomed in, I felt a blinding pain behind my eyes. The last thing I saw was her face, victorious. Then, nothing. The rebirth was not a gentle awakening. It was a violent, disorienting slam back into consciousness. I woke up with a gasp, tangled in the cheap floral bedsheets of my teenage bedroom. My heart was hammering against my ribs, the phantom agony of a cerebral aneurysm still echoing in my skull. I was 16 again. It was a rainy Tuesday in October, 10 years before my death. I could hear my mother downstairs laughing on the phone with my aunt. The sound, once just a normal part of my life, now sent a shard of ice through my veins. The first few weeks were a fever dream of confusion and terror. The memories of my future, my triumphs, my betrayal, my death, were so vivid they felt more real than the high school hallways I was now forced to walk again. I would look at my hands, the smooth, unlined skin of a teenager, and feel a profound sense of dislocation. I was a 36-year-old woman with a doctorate and a dozen published papers trapped in the body of a girl who was worried about a calculus test, but as the initial shock subsided, it was replaced by something else, a cold, diamond-hard clarity. I had been given the impossible, a second chance, a do-over. My first instinct was to run, to simply escape the suffocating gravity of my family, go to a different college, change my name, and live my life in peace, far from their toxic influence. But as I lay awake at night, the image of Amelia's smug face on that television screen would burn behind my eyelids. I remembered the dismissal in my father's eyes, the cold cruelty in my mother's voice. They hadn't just let Amelia steal my work. They had actively helped her, sacrificing me to maintain their precious narrative of her superiority. A quiet life wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't erase the injustice. It wouldn't be victory. It would be a retreat. And so, in the quiet of my teenage bedroom, the plan began to form. It started as a flicker of an idea, a spark of vengeful inspiration that grew into a raging fire. I wasn't just going to reclaim my life, I was going to orchestrate a masterpiece of retribution. My genius had been the weapon they used against me. This time, I would wield it myself. My plan had to be subtle, ironic, and absolute. I wouldn't just expose Amelia as a fraud, I would make her do it to herself. I would build her a throne so high that the fall would be fatal, and I would give her just enough rope to hang herself, her family, and their entire web of lies. First, I created my puppet master, my ghost in the machine, Dr. Evelyn Reed. I chose the name carefully. Evelyn meant life, and Reed was for the instrument that, while fragile, produces a beautiful sound. She would be everything I was not in my first life: reclusive, mysterious, and utterly confident. I spent months building her digital footprint. I bought a secure laptop with cash and used library Wi-Fi to create encrypted email accounts, academic forum profiles, and even a sparse, enigmatic social media presence that hinted at a brilliant mind working in complete seclusion. Dr. Evelyn Reed had no photos, no personal history, just a trail of devastatingly insightful comments on obscure physics blogs and solutions to famously unsolvable mathematical problems posted anonymously. I was creating a legend. While the world was getting to know Dr. Reed, I was playing my part at home. I became the perfect, disappointing daughter. I let my grades slip from straight A's to respectable B's. I feigned confusion in the subjects that had once been my sanctuary. I watched as the faint spark of hope in my father's eyes, when he looked at me, finally died out, replaced by a permanent, weary resignation. I saw the smug satisfaction on my mother's face. She had won. Her difficult daughter had finally accepted her place in the family hierarchy, firmly beneath Amelia. Amelia, meanwhile, was flourishing. With me no longer a threat, she was the undisputed star. Her parents, my aunt and uncle, poured even more resources into her. She was sent to the best prep schools, given the best tutors. I watched it all with a placid expression, a silent observer gathering data. The core of my plan was the bait. It couldn't be the Thorne-Feynman bridge from my first life. That work was mine, stained with my blood and tears. No, this had to be something new, something even more brilliant, something so complex, so revolutionary that it would be irresistible to a narcissist like Amelia. I spent the next 4 years, from age 16 to 20, secretly working on it. I called it the chrysalis theory. It proposed a radical new model for the multiverse, suggesting that universes weren't parallel, but nested, each one a simulation created by a more advanced one, and that a specific energy signature, a resonance key, could theoretically allow for information to be passed between them. It was elegant, terrifying, and utterly beyond the grasp of a B student in business administration. I coded the entire theory, the proofs, the simulations, and the research notes into a single, beautifully designed application on a state-of-the-art laptop. I made it look like the life's work of a reclusive genius. I filled the folders with years of time-stamped research, personal logs from Dr. Reed detailing her struggles and breakthroughs, even a few artfully placed failed simulations to make it look authentic. The stage was set. All I needed was for my star to find her mark. The opportunity came during the summer before Amelia and I were set to leave for our respective colleges. She was going to an expensive private university. I was heading to the local state school, my lowered ambitions, a source of constant, pitying remarks from my family. My aunt and uncle threw a massive joint going-away party for us at their house. I knew Amelia's habits. I knew her insatiable curiosity, her deep-seated belief that anything of mine was rightfully hers to inspect. An hour into the party, I made a show of getting a headache. "I'm just going to go lie down in the guest room for a bit," I told my mother, loud enough for Amelia to overhear. "My laptop is in there. I need to finish a summer assignment." I went to the guest room, turned on the laptop, and opened the main file for the chrysalis theory, its elegant diagrams and complex equations filling the screen. I left the laptop on the desk, unlocked and open. Then, I went into the adjoining bathroom, closed the door almost all the way, and waited. I had installed a tiny pinhole camera in a smoke detector months earlier. My phone, connected to its feed, was live in my hand. It took less than 10 minutes. The video on my phone showed Amelia slipping into the room, her eyes darting around nervously before locking onto the glowing screen. I watched her approach it, her expression shifting from casual snooping to disbelief, then to a raw, feverish greed I knew so well. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. She saw the name on the file, E-Read, Final Draft. A nobody. Her conscience, a tiny, withered thing, battled with her ambition for a grand total of about 30 seconds. I saw her pull a flash drive from her pocket, her movements quick and furtive. She copied the entire project. Then, she deleted the original from my laptop's recycling bin, a petty, final twist of the knife to ensure I couldn't use it myself. She closed the laptop, a triumphant, venomous smirk on her face, and slipped out of the room. I stayed in the bathroom for another 10 minutes, my body trembling not with fear, but with the electric thrill of victory. The trap had been sprung. The poison had been administered. All I had to do now was wait for the symptoms to show. The first tremors of Amelia's spectacular rise began 3 months into her freshman year of college. An email sent from her university address to the head of the physics department contained a paper that would stun the academic world. The Chrysalis Theory, a new model for nested realities, by Amelia Thorne. The paper was a masterpiece because I had written it to be. It was so far beyond the expected work of an undergraduate that it was initially met with suspicion. But I had planned for that. The research notes I'd created for Dr. Evelyn Reed were exhaustive, filled with dead ends, eureka moments, and a clear, logical progression that even a team of experts would find convincing. Amelia, armed with my notes, was able to parrot back the answers to their initial questions. She explained that it was a private project she'd been working on for years, a passion she had inherited from a mentoring relative who had recently passed away, leaving the research to her. It was a lie so sentimental and neat that they wanted to believe it. And so they did. The university, smelling prestige and massive research grants, immediately threw its entire weight behind her. She was given a private lab, a team of graduate assistants, and a blank check. Our family was catatonic with joy. My aunt and uncle were insufferable, calling everyone they knew to brag about their genius daughter. My own parents held her up as a paragon, a shining example of what happens when you have ambition, a pointed barb always aimed in my direction. "You see, Clara," my father said one evening, showing me a glossy magazine feature with Amelia's face on the cover, headlined, "The Mind That Will Redefine Reality." He sighed, his disappointment in me a palpable thing. "That's what focus looks like. Maybe if you'd applied yourself a little more?" I just smiled meekly. I'm so happy for her. And I was. I was deliriously happy. Every award she won, every grant she was given, was another brick in the prison I was building for her. I watched from the sidelines, a ghost at the feast, as she was swept up in a whirlwind of fame. She gave TED Talks, appeared on talk shows, and became the darling of the scientific community. But the pressure was immediate and immense. The chrysalis theory wasn't a static idea, it was a doorway. The world wanted to know what was on the other side. Top physicists from MIT, Caltech, and CERN began emailing her, wanting to collaborate, to discuss the deeper implications, to challenge its foundational axioms. And Amelia was drowning. I could see it in her interviews. Her eyes, once bright with smug confidence, were now shadowed with a constant gnawing anxiety. She was a brilliant mimic, able to regurgitate the abstract and the executive summary of the theory. But when a question veered off script, when a journalist or another scientist asked something truly probing, the panic would flash in her eyes. She would deflect, saying, "That's a fascinating question, and it's something my next paper will address." Or, "The core data supports the conclusion, and that's what we're focused on right now." Her team of graduate students, all of them smarter than she was, were growing frustrated. I knew one of them, a young man named Ben, who was in a few of my upper-level classes. I'd cultivated a friendship with him, playing the part of a diligent but unremarkable student. "It's the weirdest thing," Ben confessed to me one day over coffee at the campus library. "Amelia is brilliant, obviously, but it's like she's lost her car keys. She knows exactly what the car can do, the specs, the destination, but she can't for the life of her explain how the engine actually works. We ask her for guidance on the simulation protocols, and she just hands us her old notes and tells us to think outside the box. I feigned sympathy. Maybe the pressure is getting to her? That's an understatement, he scoffed. She barely sleeps. She's in the lab all night, but she's not working. She's just reading. It's like she's cramming for a final exam that her entire life depends on. He was right. Amelia was trapped in a gilded cage of my design. She had the fame, the money, the adoration, everything she had ever wanted. But she lived in constant, abject terror of the one question she could never answer. Can you explain it in your own words? While she was suffocating under the weight of my genius, I was quietly building my real future. I excelled in my own studies, retaking the path I had walked in my first life, but this time with the confidence and knowledge of a seasoned academic. I formed genuine connections with my professors who were impressed by my sudden blossoming. I also used my advanced knowledge to make a small fortune. I invested in tech startups I knew would explode and patented a few minor algorithms. Simple concepts to me, but revolutionary to the current market. By the time I was 22, I was independently wealthy, my finances completely separate from my family. I had my escape route secured. The tipping point was the announcement of the International Symposium of Advanced Physics in Geneva, Switzerland. It was the largest and most prestigious gathering of physicists in the world, and they had invited Amelia Thorne to be the keynote speaker. It was the ultimate honor. It was also the perfect stage for a public execution. In the months leading up to the symposium, I began the final phase of my plan. As the anonymous Dr. Evelyn Reed, I started a correspondence with Dr. Alastair Finch, a Nobel laureate and the grand old man of theoretical physics. He was the one man in the world whose opinion was unassailable. I sent him an anonymous email presenting a hypothetical flaw in the chrysalis theory, a subtle mathematical paradox in its core equation that only the true author would ever recognize. It was a poison pill I had coded into the theory from the very beginning. Finch was intrigued. Our email exchange became a passionate, months-long debate. He was brilliant, and I felt a pang of what my life could have been, filled with conversations with minds like his. I slowly, carefully guided him toward the truth, never revealing my identity, but giving him all the pieces he needed to see the gaping hole in the theory Amelia was championing. My final email to him came the week before the symposium. Dr. Finch, I wrote, if the author of a theory cannot defend its most fundamental postulate, then they are not its author. Ask the keynote speaker to derive the resonance key equation from first principles. Ask her what happens if you introduce a recursive feedback loop into the simulation. Then, watch what happens. I booked my ticket to Geneva. The grand hall was packed. Thousands of the world's most brilliant minds were seated, a sea of intellectual firepower all focused on the woman on the stage. Amelia stood at the podium, looking regal in a ridiculously expensive suit. Our family was in the front row, beaming with a pride so thick it was nauseating. My mother caught my eye from across the hall. I had taken a seat in the highest, most shadowed balcony, and gave me a small, pitying smile, as if to say, this is what a successful daughter looks like. I just smiled back. Amelia's speech was flawless. It was my speech, of course, a transcript from a file in the research folder I had named Keynote Draft. She delivered it with practiced confidence, the words flowing smoothly. The crowd was mesmerized. She was at the absolute apex of her fraudulent life, bathed in the adoration of her peers. As she finished, the hall erupted in a thunderous standing ovation. She smiled, a wide, relieved smile, and said, I'd be happy to take a few questions. The first few were softballs, questions she had prepared for. Then, a distinguished white-haired man in the second row stood up. It was Dr. Alastair Finch. The hall went silent. Miss Thorne, a fascinating presentation, he began, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority. I have a simple question for you. Your entire theory rests on the resonance key equation. Could you please walk us through your derivation of that equation from first principles? Specifically, How you accounted for recursive feedback without creating a paradox of infinite regression? It was the kill shot. The confident smile on Amelia's face didn't just fade, it shattered. A wave of pure animal panic washed over her features. I could see her mind racing, frantically sifting through the stolen notes, the memorized lines for an answer that wasn't there. Because I had never written it down. It was the one piece of the puzzle I had kept only for myself. The the derivation, she stammered, her voice a high-pitched squeak. She looked at the giant screen behind her as if the answer might magically appear. It's it's a highly complex process, as you know, Dr. Finch. It's detailed extensively in the appendices of my published work. Finch did not sit down. I have read your appendices, Miss Thorne. Thoroughly. It shows the result of the equation, but not its fundamental derivation. A mind that could create such a revolutionary concept should surely be able to explain its foundation. Unless, of course, the mind that created it is not the one standing before us today. The accusation, though elegantly phrased, hung in the air like a guillotine. The murmuring in the hall started, a low buzz of confusion and suspicion. Amelia's face went chalk white. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape. They found my parents in the front row, their proud smiles now frozen into masks of horror. They found my aunt and uncle, who looked like they were about to be physically ill. Amelia gripped the sides of the podium, her knuckles white. I don't have to justify my work to you, she whispered, but the microphone carried her desperate, cracking voice throughout the silent hall. You don't. Finch's voice was gentle, which made it all the more devastating. Then perhaps you can explain this. On the main screen behind Amelia, the image of her presentation was suddenly replaced by a video feed. It was the footage from the pinhole camera in the guest room years ago. The entire auditorium watched in stunned silence as a teenage Amelia crept into the room, looked around furtively, and then copied the files from my laptop onto a flash drive. The video was time-stamped. A collective gasp went through the room. Amelia spun around and saw herself on the screen, a thief caught in the act. A choked, guttural sob escaped her lips. She collapsed against the podium, her body shaking uncontrollably. It was my cue. From the shadowy back row of the highest balcony, I rose. A single spotlight, pre-arranged with the tech crew for an anonymous special presentation, found me. I walked calmly down the steps, my heels clicking with deliberate, unhurried purpose. The entire hall turned to watch my descent. I could see the utter, soul-shattering disbelief on the faces of my family. It was as if they were seeing a ghost. I reached the stage and took the microphone from the stand next to the crumpled, weeping form of my cousin. I looked at Dr. Finch, who was watching me with an expression of dawning, profound understanding. To answer your question, Dr. Finch, I said, my voice clear and steady, resonating with an authority Amelia could only ever imitate. The recursive feedback loop is accounted for by implementing a quantum state checksum at every nested iteration. It prevents paradoxical regression by treating each simulated universe as a discrete closed system. The derivation is actually quite simple if you begin from the assumption that information, not energy, is the fundamental building block of reality. I then spent the next 5 minutes without notes, without a teleprompter, effortlessly and elegantly deconstructing the most complex aspects of the chrysalis theory. I answered not only Finch's question, but the unasked questions that lay behind it. I didn't just explain the theory, I inhabited it. I showed them the soul of the work, the passion, and the years of thought that had gone into its creation. When I finished, there was a moment of absolute perfect silence. Then, the hall didn't just applaud, it erupted. It was a wave of sound, of validation, of pure intellectual celebration. Dr. Finch was the first on his feet, his face lit with a smile of pure delight. I looked down at Amelia, who was staring up at me, her face a mess of tears and mascara, her expression one of utter ruin. Then I looked at my family in the front row. My mother looked like she had seen the face of God and been judged unworthy. My father was pale, his mouth hanging open. My aunt and uncle were already scrambling to get to their disgraced daughter. But there was no escape. The doors were sealed, the cameras were rolling, and the world was watching. Justice, after a lifetime of waiting, had finally been served. The aftermath was a cleansing fire. Amelia's fall was as swift and brutal as her rise had been meteoric. The university rescinded her degrees and sued her for the fraudulent use of millions of dollars in grant money. My aunt and uncle were forced to declare bankruptcy to pay the legal fees, selling their mansion, their cars, everything they had used to prop up their golden child. They became social pariahs, the parents of the most famous academic fraud in a generation. Amelia, stripped of her identity and facing public humiliation on a global scale, suffered a complete mental breakdown. The last I heard, she was living with her parents in a small rented apartment, a recluse haunted by a genius she could touch but never possess. My own parents tried, of course. There were tearful phone calls, desperate emails, surprise visits. "We never knew, Clara," my mother wept on my voicemail. "How could we have known? We made a mistake. Please, we're your family." But the word family was ash in my mouth. "You didn't make a mistake," I told my father, the one and only time I picked up his call. "You made a choice. You had two daughters and you chose her. You have to live with that choice now." I hung up and blocked their numbers. My life, the real one, began. Dr. Alastair Finch became my mentor and champion, introducing me to a world of academia that welcomed me with open arms. The chrysalis theory, now correctly attributed to me, Clara Thorne, became the foundation of a new field of physics. The wealth I had quietly accumulated allowed me to fund my own research institute, a place dedicated to supporting brilliant minds who, like me, might otherwise be overlooked. I am not the same quiet, timid girl who died in another life. That Clara is gone. I am forged from her pain, but I am not defined by it. I am surrounded by people who respect my mind and value my presence, by friends who celebrate my successes without a hint of jealousy. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm standing in my observatory, looking up at the endless tapestry of the stars, I think about the concept of nested realities. I wonder if, in another universe, that other Clara is still alive, still fighting, still suffering. I hope not. I hope she, too, found her peace. Because I have found mine. I am successful, I am happy, and I am free. I took the ashes of the life they burned down and built an empire. And in the quiet satisfaction of my victory, I finally found the one thing I had been searching for all along, a universe that was truly my own.